Okay, so here's another video. I thought I'd just answer one question before I go into it. It was, why am I doing these videos? I have no idea. I do know that since I've started doing them, it's made me happy. It feels like I need to do this. I don't know why. So I'm doing it. All right, anyway. Anol, my one faithful viewer, actually puts comments because I know him and I tell him to put comments up. He wrote this. He said, "Hi, Mr. Grow. I love that you address the issue of other religions as being incompatible with what the Bible says." Well, yeah, that's true. Other religions are definitely incompatible with what the Bible says. In essence, it makes sense that there's basically 108 billion religions since everybody has had their own interpretation. That's true. Every person has probably had their own unique, understanding of their religions, and they could talk. Two people of the same religion could talk to each other and seem to agree about everything, but still there'd be things they couldn't have expressed to each other where they probably would have felt differently about something. You could just keep pinning them down. I remember one time there were two Mennonite guys riding on the subway in Philadelphia. They were out there, preaching, and they were doing some kind of ministry work. And I remember I walked up to them in the middle of nowhere, and I asked two Mennonite guys. I said, "We're like, do you need to be baptized in order to be saved?" And one immediately said yes, and the other one immediately said no. I was like, "Get it together, guys!" And I just walked away from them. I thought that was pretty funny. So anyway, yeah, that would be just strictly the truth. If there's been 108 billion human beings that have ever lived, all logic would seem to indicate that when you look at the anthropological record and historical records. And then since everybody's like, a great argument that I used to have about why was the Civil War fought? And then that question kept getting asked and kept getting asked. And I would debate, an African-American history teacher about it and agree with them too, but we have great discussions, And, he felt that, Abraham Lincoln was a white supremacist. He felt that the reason why the North fought it was for economic reasons. He felt a lot of things like that. And I was like, there's some truth to all of it. Here's the point, though. The truth about the Civil War, it was fought for all the reasons that everyone fought it for. So if there were 10, 20 million people who fought in the Civil War, each person had their own set of reasons for wanting to fight in that war, and the reasons could have shifted as the war went on. And so now you got to look for overlap. You can't tell me that there weren't some people who fought in the Civil War because they hated slavery. And they fought for the North for it. I imagine there might have been some people who fought for the South that hated slavery. But they, I know slavery's wrong. I mean, but I got to defend my homeland. I'm sure there were some people who even did that. It's just a question of, looking for the greatest overlap to say the biggest reason why the Civil War was fought. I mean, imagine a lot of people fought in the Civil War for the North just because their government told them to. So anyway, well, that's just an aside because it has a certain symmetry in my mind, a certain similarity in my mind with different religions. You get a bunch of Catholics in a room and they're going to debate all day long about what they really believe, and I know that the same is true with Judaism, particularly since everything suggests to me that Judaism is a religion that's like question everything and keep questioning. And I'm imagine the same is true with Islam, because look at how many sources they can turn to. They have all the hadiths, they have all the, the Quran itself, and so it's imagine with you put 10 different Muslims in a room, and you're probably going to get a lot of disagreement about what's true. But if those, just like a bunch of Jewish people, a bunch of Catholic people, a bunch of Islamic people who are under pressure from the outside world, they're under oppression or being attacked in some way, they'll unify fast. They'll be like, one thing we know, we're Jewish, one thing we know, we're Muslims, one thing we know, we're Catholics, we're going to fight, and work together on this, and so that's one of the biggest problems with religion. It's so easily confounded as an organizing principle of your society. I mean, right now, if you were, a strong Russian kid who believed in your leader Vladimir Putin, I bet you're going to a Russian Orthodox church, every Sunday and praying on your knees, but it's not that you really are thinking about Jesus, but you're really thinking about, the love that you have for your people and the love that you have for your society is guiding you to do that. And that's always hard to try to separate the two. I'm an American. I want to be apple pie, Jesus Christ. Absolutely. I want to identify with all of my American brothers and sisters, as much as I possibly can. I want to sing the Star Spangled Banner and my eyes have seen the glory and all that stuff. But let's take a step back from patriotism. Let's take a step back from looking at the organizing principles of society, and let's take a hard look at what is going on with Christianity. And at its root is a belief in the resurrection of this one person that clearly violates the laws of physics. And it would appear to me, whether you believe God exists or not, and I'm going to say that God exists even though I don't have evidence or proof of that. But I think it's better for us to think that there's an all-powerful, all-loving God and that we're going to be judged and there's an afterlife. I think it's better for us to believe that. And I think there's plenty of people who are going to go to heaven who, to their dying day, are going to say, I believe in Jesus. And everyone who says, I believe in Jesus, has their own understanding of what that means. Every single person. And I'm sure there's many people who are going to say, I believe in Jesus. And just like the Bible even said, there's a quote in the Bible where it says, people will say, Jesus, and Jesus will say, I didn't even know you, and so there's all, so there it is. A whole bunch of people could say they believe in Jesus, but that they do all kinds of evil things and hurt their brothers and sisters. And so what good is it to believe in Jesus? There it is, right? I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. So where are we at? In essence, it makes sense that there's basically 108 billion religions. So everybody has their own interpretation. So Noel goes on and he says, I guess a good follow-up would be if there was a God that we knew about and that was actually active and present in our lives. An active and present God in our lives. God, the issues that I've been through with that. The issues that I've been through with the idea that there's been a God active and present in our lives. It's sort of like, you're going to go to the grocery store. You're trying to decide whether or not to go to the grocery store. And a song comes on the radio. And the song's like, on the road again. I can't wait to get on the road again. You're like, oh, it's a message from God. I should go to the store because it's telling me I got to go on the road. Hey, watch The Leftovers and the story of the grandfather that goes to Australia and all that. And he's led by these signs. And absolutely, I have seen that in my believing in being in sync. Absolutely believing that I'm thinking about something and then I see something that's connected to what I'm thinking about, and I believe that it's a sign from the divine or from angels or something like that is guiding me in the present moment. And there's been some times where that's borne such incredibly beautiful fruit. Beautiful poetic moments have happened in my life because of that idea. But there's been other times that were just completely absurd. And so, our brains, the more we study how the brain works, and I'm reading books about it and trying to understand, how the brain works as much as I possibly can, because, my life has been so profoundly impacted by mental illness. I mean, I've lost everything because of other people in my immediate family, my extended family, whatever, other important relationships I had where people just seem to fall into mental illness. And it's like, oh my God, what's going on here? And so my life has been so profoundly impacted by it that I need to understand how the brain works better. So I've been reading that one book, Books on Tape. I understand it to some level. I don't know if it's I don't even know if it's strong, but 1,000 Brains, A New Theory of Intelligence. And it's had some impact upon me, So the number one thing that I'm coming up with, the number one thing I'm seeing is everything needs to be separable. Just because I'm saying the resurrection didn't happen doesn't mean I'm denying the existence of God. It doesn't mean that. God might be. Actually, I think that the correct attitude to have about God is agnosticism. I am ultimately an agnostic. I do not know if there's an all-powerful, all-loving creator. I do not know If God's there, I don't even know what his attributes are. I think that that it's totally a good idea to believe that there's an all-powerful, all-loving God, and that we will have some kind of existence after our death. I think it's, even without evidence, that's still something that can be believed. Now, get into geometry. We accept as postulates various things, and then after we accept as postulates various things, we can prove that the 180 degrees inside of a triangle, the measure of this sums of a triangle, 100. If we accept the existence of parallel lines, that's a very, study that if you don't know what I'm talking about. It was, how do we know that the three angles of a triangle add up to 180 degrees? How do we know? Well, it's because we accept the existence of parallel lines. Really? Yeah, really. Look it up. Get a good geometry textbook and look at the proof for why the three angles of a triangle add up to 180 degrees. Well, how do we know parallel lines exist? Well, they seem to locally. I can draw two lines and they look like they're parallel. But how do I know those lines don't go on forever and in some way they start to intersect? How do I know at the extremes parallelism's real? It just seems locally to be real. So why am I bringing up parallel lines? Because it's like, it seems reasonable to accept the existence of God in an afterlife without proof. And then what do you do based upon that? Okay, so once I believe that God exists, I know now that the most important thing to do is get baptized? I don't know. There's a lot of priests that will tell you that. Maybe, that they might be worth listening to. But even there, there's something very powerful. Look at my first video where I try to lay out very clearly what I'm trying to say. Break Jesus down to what we must fundamentally know is true about him. It's highly likely that Jesus existed. Everyone agrees on that, just about. It's highly likely that he existed. It's highly likely that he was actually executed by Pontius Pilate around 33 AD, like they say. That's highly likely to have occurred. In all the Gospels, it says that he rode into Jerusalem on a donkey. There's, whatever we know about him, it's probably true that he believed that he was the actual king. The actual king of Israel, just like any king in exile when there's a conquering army that takes over that area, like Rome, What do we know about him? Just those basic truths. And then if you put it together, riding in Jerusalem on the back of a donkey and preaching to the people for about a week, was a pretty amazing thing. Just knowing that about him and knowing nothing else, it's like, wow, he really... Maybe he shouldn't have done that because you're just going to get yourself killed, But that's nevertheless what he did. And then we've been hearing his name as the most important name in Western culture for the next 2,000 years. And a lot of people will use that as a self-confirmation of the resurrection. They'll be like, well, since there must be something to it. Because look at how big, everywhere you look, there's another church with his cross up there. And so therefore that must be, well, maybe. But one thing I do know when considering the existence of Islam and the ongoing existence of Judaism is the fact remains that it would appear that those three religions, any form of Christianity as a rule, any form of Judaism as a rule, any form of Islam as a rule, they all contradict each other. They're all in strong disagreement about fundamental truths. All of them. And if there's an all-powerful, all-loving God in this world, therefore we have to say that an all-powerful, all-loving God allows generation after generation for 1,000 years to believe things that are false. Scientific investigation and all the insights that we have in the modern era about how the world truly works would indicate that Moses never really parted the Red Sea. Muhammad never did any of the miracles he did. The one about the moon or whatever. And, Jesus never walked on water. That's the way the laws of physics work. Those things did not happen. And it's more ready to believe that God allows for humanity to invent religions and lie to itself. It's hard to say it that way, but yeah, and lie to itself about him. That's more readily believed than the miracles of the Bible or the miracles of the Quran or the miracles of the Torah. Okay, so once you get that out of the way, that doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. Just because the Bible has a lot of falseness in it doesn't mean that it isn't worth reading, and it still isn't a beautiful book. It still hasn't produced great fruit as a work of literature. I mean, whoever wrote the Gospel of Matthew and whoever wrote, the Paul's letter to the Hebrews, that's the one we're pretty sure Paul actually didn't write that one, but it's attributed to him. It's beautiful literature. It's like, wow, to read it is stunning. The things it says, it pulls you in and it makes you feel all kinds of really powerful stuff. At least it did for me. So I'm saying it's still worth reading. But what were the intentions of the people who actually wrote it? Did they really, want people to have the feelings that they now feel about these books all these years later? I mean, I don't think so. I mean, it's high time, and many are doing it, I'm sure, to basically, synthesize a new religion out of the old ones. Don't throw them out. If some man, or even a woman, but if some man, is sitting and saying, I've studied into seminary for 5 years, and I've been ordained by the bishop, and I have, through the ministry of the church, the authority to forgive your sins. I mean, what is even sin in the first place is a conversation to have. Then, why not, in an act of love, accept that? Okay, yeah, sure, right. Somebody's got to be the person who has the authority to forgive sin. Let him be the person with the authority to do that in this community, in this parish, in this area. Why not? Jews, Jewish people would be like, that's absurd, and only God can forgive sin, I suppose is what they would say. But, okay. It's like, is it wrong for someone to want that to be true and to act accordingly? And if a priest does it well, and maybe even study psychology classes, I mean, you could go in front of a priest. I'm sure you could go in front of any Catholic priest in the confessional and be like, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been 3 months since my last confession. Father, I'm going to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm working on my sinfulness all the time. I'm visiting a psychologist, and I'm working on trying to be better, and I'm just asking you to forgive me. I can't go through all the sins that I've committed, and I don't want to. The priest is going to be like, you're forgiven. Absolutely. You're good, man. Say 3 Hail Marys and get out of here. Why not? What is wrong with that process? There's nothing wrong with that process. And we could see what the initial seed of the forgiveness of sin in the Bible was. It was a dramatic transfer of power from people who had it to people who did not have it. Here, the creation of the forgiveness of sin that was absolutely by this group of people, by Jesus and the group of people he selected, was a rebellious act. It was a brilliant move in a situation where they couldn't beat the Roman authority with swords and weapons, and they didn't want to be subservient to them because, God damn it, I'm not going to be subservient to conquerors. You're stuck between collaboration and dying in an epic fight that you're just destined to lose because Rome is too tough. I mean, this is what happens when a conquering army comes, and there's so much more. Imagine being an American Indian, and the Civil War is over, and it's 1870, and you want to fight the American army. We just finished off the Civil War, and we're building those railroads, and we're going to take over the West. There's no way that the people, the great tribes of the American plains and all that, was going to be able to stand up to the American army. With all our factories and the 1,000 years that Western society had in connection with the Silk Road and developing languages and gunpowder and all the things all the advantages technologically that the European settlers had. There was just no way they could stand up to that. It was inevitable, essentially, that the American army was going to take over the Great Plains. Does that make it right? There's a huge discussion there. And at first glance, it doesn't appear right at all. It's horrible. And so, the American Indians responded to it, the Sioux and Red Cloud. I just read a book about Red Cloud not long ago. They responded to it as best they knew how, And it would seem that dilemma happens. Read Resistance, Rebellion, and Death by Albert Camus. needing to fight the Nazis when they took over Paris, because the Nazis had no right to be in Paris in 1941, you know? And we could go through countless examples of this. And the inevitability of things, it's sad. But what appears to have happened to me, what appears to have happened with Jesus so logically, is that he clearly saw the dilemma that he was in, and he acted accordingly. He made a new religion that ultimately took down the Roman Empire. Now, there could have been other things that took down the Roman Empire. I'm aware of that. Lead in the water. There's other things that could have taken down the Roman Empire. But, after he dies 100 and 200 years later, it's like he was an expert at identifying what Rome does. And he created a religion that attacked Rome at its base. And he brought his number one enemy down by doing that. And you can say all you want that was guided by the hand of God, that was, God's plan all along. Yeah, maybe. I mean, what's your evidence? I mean, something had to have happened, and that's one of the biggest things. One of the truths of history is something has to happen. So it's like, if it wasn't for that, there was one of these guys was talking online about astrology. The astrology, the study of the stars and all that. But for maybe, a little bit, it would have been Jesus's cross all over the place. It would be astrology would be the thing that we worship right now. The night sky. And, so anyway, I don't even know what I'm talking about. This video is too long. Let me see. What did he write? I guess it would be a good follow-up would be if there was a God then that we knew about and that was actually active and present in our lives, would we be better or worse? And as a follow-up, how do you think that would affect society as a whole? And are there any examples of fictional universes where the question is addressed? I mean, it's a pretty complex topic. I might have to save that one for a future video. This one, I'm going to put this video up, but it's too distracting and all over the place. But I'm speaking from the heart here. I want to also get into talking about everything that I can talk about. Yeah. Hopefully it's worth it. Love you guys.